Good evening, everyone. I'm Sudiksha. Today we'll be discussing the contents of week 8, which pertains to digestive system, and then following that we will discuss some questions related to that. Let me just share my screen. Okay. Um, okay. So, uh, we have covered classification, evolution, how cells are structured, what are the biomolecules that make up different cells in the tissue, and what are the cellular processes that that are mediated by these biomolecules and vice versa. Now we will be looking at the physiology of any organism. We will be looking at specifically the human digestive system, but there are differences between human digestive system and other digestive systems of other organisms, but that is beyond the scope of this course. Okay. So, the physiology of any organism, specifically a mammalian system, can be divided into all of these categories. There is the digestive system, which breaks down whatever food is uh, whatever food any organism takes up. There is the circulatory system, which after the digestive system has absorbed all the nutrients, the circulatory system uh, passes the nutrients that were collected by the digestive system to the whole body, so that every tissue and every organ gets nutrients for its survival. There's the muscular system, which is responsible for locomotion. The muscular system also feeds, there are certain aspects of muscular system that aid the other systems. There's the nervous system, which controls different actions and different parts of the body. There's the endocrine system, which creates molecules, small molecules, which are known as hormones, which are regulators of different kinds of activities within the body. Which the endocrine system in turn essentially can regulate all of the other systems. There is the excretory system, which whatever waste products are produced within the body are thrown out by the excretory system. And if during the process of the processing during the process of food breakdown, or during the process of absorption, if there is any nutrients that were bypassed into the system where the excreta is collected, there is an option of additional uptake in during that process, during the filtering process, but we'll come to that later. Okay, so sorry uh, there are different modes of nutrition or different organisms. The Any organism can be divided primarily into two parts. It can most organisms can be placed in two bubbles of sorts. One bubble is the autotrophic nutrition, which implies that the Auto means self, trophism means food, which means that the organism is synthesizing its own food. Uh, these are primarily plants wherein they have their chlorophyll, they have the chloroplast, they can make their own food by using some external stimuli and external nutrients. Animals, on the other hand, are come under heterotrophic mode of nutrition. That implies that they are dependent on other animals or plants for their food uptake. Heterotrophic nutrition can be further divided into three parts. Holozoic nutrition, which implies taking the whole food. What it means is that you are ingesting any material as it is or in some processed form, but you are not breaking it down into individual constituents. You are ingesting it as an entire organic food. It can be a whole or a part of a plant or an animal. These most free living protozoans, humans, and other animals fall under this category. The next one is saprophytic mode of nutrition, in which the organism devours rotten parts of other dead organisms and decaying matter. So essentially what they do is they secrete various enzymes that can digest the food outside of their body, and the broken down portion that is essentially a simplified uh, source of food is what they take up. So houseflies, spiders are examples of such. There are many microbial organisms that follow saprophytic mode of nutrition, wherein they grow on the decaying matter. They use the decaying matter as their food source. They essentially secrete various enzymes or various compounds that can break down the complex matter in the dead organism into a simpler molecule that they can take up. There is parasitic mode of nutrition, wherein the organism takes up nutrition directly from another organism. There are of two types. The extracellular, extra host, external or internal. External ones stay outside of the body. The examples are ticks, lice, insects, etc. Internal parasites enter the body cavity of the host usually, or the bloodstream of the host, and they stay there. They are examples are Plasmodium. This enters the bloodstream. Tapeworms stay in the body cavity. So why do we need to eat food? We need to eat food to gain energy. And where is this energy coming from? It is coming from all the bonds that that are present within the food. So primarily the food that we ingest is heavily dependent on carbon as one of the major molecule, as one of the major atoms inside it. So this carbon can bind to if you see a molecule of glucose, the carbon present within that glucose has bound to H, O, or it can bind to another carbon. So each of these bonds that the carbon has some energy in it, which implies that the bond was formed using that much energy. Breakage of bond is also going to release some energy. It might not be the exact value as this, but on a whole it will release some energy. So when the digestive system is breaking down all of the food into simpler uh, uh, components and then processing it later on, what it essentially is doing is it is releasing energy which can then be utilized by the body. Okay. Please stop me if there are any questions, because I can't see the chat box right now. Please just call out or raise your hand. I'll get a notification. Okay. So, the when we eat any food that has multiple components in it, what we eat can be broken down to carbohydrates or polysaccharides, fat, and proteins, and there is some amount of nucleic acids in them as well. This starch, which is starch is one example of the carbohydrate, uh, is a type of polysaccharide which can finally be broken down to glucose or other six molecule uh, six carbon compounds. Fat is a long chain polymer. It can be broken down finally to make fatty acids. Proteins can be broken down to make amino acids. So when we eat food, it first goes into the buccal cavity. What buccal cavity comprises of is mouth, salivary glands, tongue, and within the mouth there is tongue and teeth. Then the food enters the esophagus. There is not much. Esophagus is just a connection, mostly a connection between mouth and the stomach. What it does, it has a mucous lining which contributes to the formation of the bolus to some extent. There is stomach, where which is highly acidic, so it helps break down a lot of components within the food. There is small intestine. There is small intestine, where a lot of uh, further processing and absorption of food happens, and there is large intestine which again is responsible for absorption of some components, but mostly the absorption part occurs here in the small intestine. The digestion part can occur in stomach and small intestine, and to some extent in the buccal cavity. Okay, the buccal cavity itself consists of tongue, the teeth, and the surrounding cavity, essentially the surrounding cover. So there is the vestibule and the oral cavity. Vestibule is essentially this area between the lips and the teeth, between the cheeks and the gums. It's known as the vestibule. The cavity that is surrounded by palate, tongue, and teeth is known as the oral cavity or the buccal cavity, and this is where the food gets initially broken down. It's essentially broken down into small pieces, then mixed with saliva. The saliva itself has certain components in it that can help in initial okay help in initial digestion of the food. The mixture of food and saliva is known as bolus. This bolus then moves you after swallowing or deglutition. It moves into the esophagus. The esophagus sends it to stomach afterwards. Okay. The tongue has, even though it looks pretty smooth and uh, without any proper demarcation, has multiple areas in it. There, there is a line that divides the tongue into the pharyngeal part, which is beyond the buccal cavity, and there is a oral part which is within the buccal cavity. The pharyngeal part essentially connects the tongue to the esophagus. There are multiple areas within the tongue that are responsible for different taste perception. Because the way they are structured, the receptors uh, on these taste buds are different. So the back of the tongue is mostly responsible for bitter tasting, the sides for sour, the front is for salty taste, and the middle portion is for sweet taste. These fungiform papillae, these papillae are responsible for uh, the texture and taste perception of the tongue, within the tongue. Teeth are of four types. Uh, Within any organism, there is incisors required for cutting, canines required for meat tearing, molars responsible for crushing, and premolars responsible for grinding. Depending on what kind of food habit the organism has, the proportion of these will change. For example, herbivores don't need to cut into any meat, so they have very little or no incisors. For example, rabbit does not have incisors, whereas carnivores, because they have they need to their diet is primarily meat, they need to have very developed incisors. So if you were to look at the formula for teeth, if you were to write the teeth formula, it essentially covers half of one jaw. So this is the upper portion is the upper jaw, half of the upper jaw, and this is the lower jaw. Most of the organisms have pretty symmetrical teeth formation, so therefore it's not essential that you write the whole jaw formula. You can only write half of it. So first is the incisor, then canines, then premolars, and then molars. This is for humans, 2, 1, 2, 3. If there are no wisdom teeth, this is for an adult human. Milk teeth have a different arrangement. This is for an adult human. If the human does not have wisdom teeth, then it will be 2, 1, 2, 2. Okay. Yeah. Then coming to the structure of the teeth, any tooth can be visualized as a structure like this, wherein there is crown, there is a neck portion, and there is root. So the crown is the portion that is exposed to the outside. It is covered by a layer of enamel. this is the portion that comes in contact with food. Then there is dentine, that is responsible for the strength within the teeth. It forms the core of the teeth essentially. The gum holds the teeth in place. There is some level of circulation within the teeth as well. If anything happens to the root, then the teeth, if the root gets infected or blocked, then the teeth is considered as a dead teeth. Next, coming to esophagus. So you have the bolus has passed from the mouth into the esophagus. It's also known as the food pipe. It's 25 centimeter long. It is present behind trachea and heart. It does not have any digestive function as such, but it is responsible for conduction of the food from the mouth to the stomach, and this is done by involuntary muscle contraction known as peristalsis. So within the esophagus there are, so any muscle that you see can be arranged in form of fibers longitudinally or in form of rings, circular muscles. In case of esophagus, the muscles are circular muscles, and which is what aids in the peristaltic movement. Due to the internal muscles are circular, in the external muscles are longitudinal in case of esophagus. Combination of both aids the bolus movement towards the stomach. Then there is the cardiac sphincter that lies between the esophagus and stomach, and it allows for the conduction of the bolus to the stomach. This sphincter also after the bolus has passed into the stomach, the sphincter closes. It prevents the reflux of the food back into the esophagus. Medulla oblongata has the necessary signaling mechanisms to control peristalsis. Stomach is the widest organ of the alimentary canal. It can be divided into body and antrum. The upper portion is known as the oral portion, which is the first 2/3 of the body, and the remainder is the caudal portion. So it's rest of the body, like 1/3 of the body, and antrum is the caudal portion. When the food enters into the stomach, it forms concentric circles. It can stretch the stomach wall, and there is a lot of nervous regulation going on at this point to prevent the food from going back into esophagus, to ensure that the food only goes downwards. The stomach is an elastic organ, so it can extend its capacity to some extent to accumulate greater amount of food. So a completely relaxed stomach can accumulate up to 1.5 liters of food. After mixing the food with the stomach secretions, which is mainly acidic in nature, the mixture is known as chyme, which then passes into the small intestine. Some digestion takes place here, and there is absorption of there is production of gases intrinsic factor which is required for absorption of vitamin B12 through the intestinal wall. Okay. Next, so we have covered buccal cavity, esophagus and stomach. Next comes the small intestine, which comprises of three parts. The upper part is known as duodenum, the middle part is known as jejunum, and the lowermost part which connects to the large intestine is known as ileum. Length of the small intestine is correlated with the height of the person and is about 6.2 meters long, but differs a little bit depending on the height. It is the longest part of alimentary canal. It is highly convoluted to ensure that 6.25 meters fit into that small area. Here also, the chyme that comes from the stomach is conducted through peristaltic movement. And there is, in the stomach, majority of digestion happens and a lot of absorption also takes place within the stomach. Complete digestion of proteins, carbohydrates, fats and nucleic acids occur here. Just 1 second. The large intestine has the diameter of the large intestine is larger than that of small intestine, but it's not consistent. It is around 1.5 meter long, but the thickness of the large intestine varies from region to region. This is also divided into three portions: cecum, which cecum, colon and rectum. Cecum is the cecum is the area that joins the small intestine to the large intestine. Colon is divided into three parts: ascending colon, transverse colon and descending colon. And then there is the rectum, which connects to the anus for ejection of extra food. Cecum is a pouch type structure and it has an outgrowth known as vermiform appendix. In other herbivorous in other organisms such as herbivores, this appendix has a lot of bacteria that help in breakdown of cellulose, but in humans the tolerance for these bacteria and the usage of these bacteria is very limited. So usually the appendix is sealed off in case of humans. There is a small membrane that guards the appendix from coming in contact with the food. If it comes in contact with the food, then there is a possibility of bacterial infection in that area, and which can lead to further problems and finally appendicitis. So if there is a rupture of this membrane, then there is a need for surgical measures to remove the appendix. The junction of ileum with cecum is guided by the ileocecal valve. This prevents the fecal contents from moving from colon to ileum. So at every point where there is a junction, there is a need for a valve or a sphincter, so that there is no backflow of material. If there is backflow of material, it will go to a previous state and that might be harmful for the individual. The proximal region of colon is concerned mainly with absorption and the distal region with storage. And the lower portion of the descending colon is sigmoidal in shape and opens into rectum. It's 20 centimeter long and terminates in a 2 centimeter long anal tract. When a mass movement propels feces into the rectum, the desire for defecation occurs. And the opening of the anal tract is known as anus. There are two sphincters in the anus. There is an internal anal sphincter and an external anal sphincter. The internal one is not is composed of smooth muscle fiber, because of which it's not completely voluntary. The external one, however, is composed of striped muscle fiber. Therefore, because of this reason, it's voluntary in nature. There is a large quantity of vitamin B complex and vitamin K found in the bacteria that is present in the large intestine. And a lot of water absorption also occurs here within the large intestine. There is a lot of recent studies about this is just extra information though. There's a lot of recent studies about the microbiota that is present within the intestinal compartment of humans. So this microbiota is responsible for a lot of functions within the body. There are known relations with cognition, with health of the individual, and if there is a disbalance in the microbiota, by microbiota I mean the microorganisms that are present within the intestinal compartment. If there is some good bacteria and some bad bacteria, if it's primarily good bacteria, then it is useful for the human being. Whereas if it's bad bacteria, if it's harmful bacteria, then it can cause other problems. Okay. Next, we look at glands. So, there are several secretory glands lined up throughout the digestive system. What they do is they secrete various digestive enzymes for the food breakdown, and they are also responsible for secreting mucus. Mucus forms a layer between, so if this is the food bolus and if this is the wall of the alimentary canal, mucus forms a layer between the food bolus and the alimentary canal. It firstly protects the alimentary canal from damage from the food. Secondly, it also provides lubrication for the food to pass down properly. There are several salivary glands present within the buccal cavity. There are three major glands: parotid, submandibular, and sublingual glands. These are named by the position they are in. So parotid gland is somewhere present near the ear. There is sublingual gland under the tongue and submandibular in the jaw. And an healthy individual secretes about 0.8 to 1.5 liters of saliva daily. The saliva has two kinds of secretions. One is ptyalin, which is an alpha amylase. So alpha amylases are responsible for breaking down polysaccharides. So alpha amylase is mainly responsible for digestion of starch and other complex polysaccharides. Then there is mucin for protection of the surface. Mucin gives rise to the mucus layer that is helpful for lubrication and protection. Parotid glands are the largest salivary glands situated near the ears, and there is a pair near both the ears. These glands mainly secrete ptyalin, whereas the submandibular and sublingual glands secrete both ptyalin and mucin. There are other small glands present throughout the buccal cavity. They secrete only mucus. They don't have ptyalin secreting cells. The pH of saliva is between 6.6 to 7, which favors digestive action of ptyalin. So, I don't know if you guys know this, but any enzyme requires an optimum pH and a temperature for its action. This optimum, if you go beyond the optimum pH and temperature, either it can go inactive or it can denature depending on the condition. So the area where the enzyme or the enzyme is acting needs to have the optimum condition for the maximal activity of the enzyme. Okay. Then there are gastric glands which are present within the stomach. The entire lining of the stomach contains mucus secreting cells, so that the stomach is protected from its own secretions. The stomach mucosa has two types of tubular glands. Is there a question? No. Two types of tubular glands: oxyntic glands or gastric glands and pyloric glands. The oxyntic glands secrete, which are here, secrete hydrochloric acid, pepsinogen, and intrinsic factor, and mucus, of course. The pyloric gland mostly secretes mucus for protection from the stomach acid, and they also secrete the gastrin hormone, which is responsible for appetite balance. The next, one of the largest glands of the body is the liver. It secretes, the secretions that come from liver are called as bile. They're mostly salts, and they are there are also some hormones that come from liver, but for the digestive portion it's mostly bile. It serves two major functions: fat digestion and absorption. The bile salts help emulsify the large fat particles and food into many small particles, and the surface can be attacked by lipase, which are secreted by the pancreas. This in coordination ensures that lipids are taken up from the food. Bile acids also aid in absorption of the end product digested fat through the intestinal mucosal membrane. One of the important waste product is bilirubin, which is an end product of hemoglobin digestion and excess of cholesterol. Both of these components are secreted out with the help of bile. And there is a pear-shaped structure attached to the posterior surface of liver. that stores around 30 to 60 ml of bile. And then the structure can release bile if needed. Then comes pancreas, which is a soft, lobulated, large compound gland. It has multiple kinds of cells, and each of these cells have their own function. It lies parallel and posterior to the stomach downwards. The pancreatic acini secrete digestive enzymes, whereas large amount of sodium bicarbonate solution are secreted by small ductules and large ducts. The digestive enzymes are responsible for breaking down different components within the food. The sodium bicarbonate helps in balancing the pH of the food. So the food that is coming from the stomach is acidic in nature. The chyme essentially is acidic in nature. But the stomach lining has the capacity to handle the acidic nature of the chyme. However, the intestinal epithelium does not have the capacity to handle the acidic nature. Therefore, it needs to be neutralized by the sodium bicarbonate secreted by pancreas at the junction of the stomach and the small intestine. The pancreatic duct joins with the hepatic duct before it empties into the duodenum through the papilla of Vater. So secretions from the liver and which comes from the hepatic duct and the pancreatic duct both are poured into the duodenum, which helps in maintaining the pH and starts digesting some of the components. There are several secretions that the pancreas are responsible for. They can secrete trypsin, chymotrypsin and carboxypeptidase, which are responsible for breakdown of proteins. The pancreas secretes pancreatic amylase, responsible for breakdown of carbohydrates. It also secretes lipase, different lipases, pancreatic lipase, cholesterol esterase and phospholipases, responsible for breakdown of fats. Next come the intestinal glands. These are formed by the modification of the surface epithelium of the small intestine, and there are two kinds of intestinal glands, the Brunner's glands and crypts of Leverkusen. So the intestinal gland, I think there is a structure, no. Okay. The intestinal gland is composed of these crypts, and there are these valleys and there are these hills in the intestinal epithelium. Now the glands are present in the valleys, the Brunner's glands and crypts of Leverkusen, whereas the hills are projections that go into projections present on the surface of the intestinal epithelium, and these are responsible for the absorption of the food. Brunner's gland are only found in first few centimeters of the duodenum, and they secrete a large amount of alkaline mucus to protect the duodenal wall from the highly gastric acidic gastric juice and to neutralize hydrochloric acid. The other glands, the crypts of Leverkusen, are small pits located all over the entire surface of the small intestine and lies between the intestinal villi. Okay, so these are the crypts, the valleys, and these are the villi, the projections that go up. These villi again have microvilli in them. We'll come to it in the next lecture, I think. These also have microvilli in them, which increases the surface area of the absorption. Okay. So the crypts and villi are covered by epithelium composed of two types of cells: goblet cells, which secrete mucus, and enterocytes that secrete water and electrolytes. They also are responsible for absorption of water and electrolytes along with different digestion products. So enterocytes are the one that are responsible for absorption and some extent secretion. At the base of the crypts, Paneth cells and Argentaphil cells are present. These are enteroendocrine cells. Okay. So there are multiple enzymes that are secreted in every portion of the alimentary canal. There is ptyalin, which is a salivary amylase secreted at mouth, responsible for breaking down polysaccharides. The components that are secreted in the stomach are responsible for breakdown of proteins, little bit of fat, and casein, which is another protein, but it is not efficiently digested by pepsin. The all other components, starch, proteins, complex carbohydrates, simpler carbohydrates, nucleic acid, everything else gets digested in the small intestine by secretions from the pancreas and the small intestine and liver. Okay. So we already saw this, but let's look at these in detail. So as I said, ptyalin is responsible for digestion of starch. It essentially starch is a very complex molecule, so it breaks it down to simpler carbohydrates, which can then be further broken down to form glucose molecules. Within the stomach, there are two proenzymes produced, pepsinogen and prorenin. Anything with gen or pro in their name is a proenzyme. It's not the final enzyme. It is produced in this way so that the action of the enzyme does not happen within the cells in which they are secreted from. So they are present in a conformation such that they are inactive. Also, the pH of the conditions of that area is not favorable for the action of those enzymes. Both of these proenzymes get activated by HCl. So, pepsinogen is under a positive feedback loop, wherein pepsinogen can be converted into pepsin initially using the pH of the system, the hydrochloric acid. However, these pepsin molecules can further convert more pepsinogen molecules into pepsin, causing a feed forward loop. Prorenin can converted into its active form renin by presence of HCl or pepsin. Both pepsin helps in digestion of the carbohydrates. Renin helps in digestion of casein into paracasein. Paracasein can then combine with calcium and form calcium paracaseinate, which then passes down into the small intestine. Small intestine has three proenzymes which come from the pancreatic secretions: trypsinogen, chymotrypsinogen, and procarboxypeptidase. Initial activation of trypsinogen into trypsin happens by enterokinase, but afterwards trypsin can itself activate its trypsinogen into trypsin. Trypsin can further activate chymotrypsinogen to form chymotrypsin and procarboxypeptidase to form carboxypeptidase. Essentially, what is needed is that wherever the enzymes are present in their native form, uh, is where they should be doing their action at. If they are active in the cell in which they are synthesized, then it's going to start digesting the cell. It might leak into the peritoneum of the human, which will have very dire consequences. Okay. So how do these proteins get digested? Proteins and peptones, when under trypsin, become peptides, smaller peptides. These peptides can be broken down further by carboxypeptidase to form smaller peptides which can be absorbed. Casein can, along with renin, can be casein, renin and on casein, both renin and chymotrypsin can digest and form paracasein, which can then combine with calcium and form calcium paracaseinate, which is also coming from the stomach, if you remember correctly. Then the calcium paracaseinate can be broken down in presence of chymotrypsin or trypsin to form peptides and calcium. This calcium can get absorbed into the bloodstream for bone and teeth mineralization. Peptides can be absorbed as a source of amino acids. If the diet is very meat rich, then there will be elastin molecules in the diet. These are extracellular matrix proteins present within our tissue. The elastin molecules can be broken down by elastase to form peptides. Larger peptides can be broken down in presence of carboxypeptidase to form smaller peptides. And within the jejunum, within the small intestine, the smaller peptides and peptones can be, under the action of aminopeptidase, converted into oligopeptides and amino acids. These amino acids then go for absorption. Okay. How does carbohydrate get digested? So within the mouth, within it, there is salivary amylase or ptyalin. What it does is it breaks down starch to form maltose, isomaltose, and limit dextrin. Limit dextrin, when it goes further down the alimentary canal, under the action of limit dextrinase, can break down to glucose. Maltose can, under the action of maltase, break down into glucose. Isomaltose, under action of maltase, can break down into glucose. Lactose, if present, can be broken down by lactase to form glucose and galactose. All of this is happening in small intestine. If lactose is present, if bacteria, there are anaerobic bacteria present, lactose can be utilized by the anaerobic bacteria to produce gas within the small intestine. Okay. So after the glucose galactose molecules or fructose molecules are formed, all of this get absorbed in the small intestine. Coming to the structure of fat, uh, fat is a combination of glycerol and fatty acids. If you are looking at a triglyceride, so what if you are ingesting triglycerides, what you need to do is you need to do the reverse reaction wherein you are breaking it to fatty acids and glycerol. So this action of breaking it to fatty acids and glycerol is done by lipases. So where all different kinds of digestion is happening. Starch gets digested within the buccal cavity to form maltose, which stays the same in stomach, and maltose then converts into different components, and which can in the small intestine converted into glucose and absorbed. Fats can be converted into fatty acids and glycerol in stomach, which can be further converted into simpler forms in the small intestine, and very complex fats can be converted into simpler forms in small intestine, and then finally the fatty acids and glycerol get absorbed. Proteins can be converted into peptones, larger or smaller peptides, and finally within the small intestine they are converted into amino acids and absorbed. DNA or RNA, which is present in very small amounts, can be converted into nucleosides, nitrogenous bases, or pentose sugars in the small intestine and get absorbed. So remember I was saying about crypts and villi. So within the intestinal wall, there are these projections that come outwards, and there are these valleys within the epithelium. So epithelium is the covering of the top covering of the intestinal wall. So the villi which is present here perform the function of absorption of material, whereas the crypts of Liverpool have cells responsible for secreting various components. Also there are intestinal renewing cells present within the crypts of Liverpool. Okay, but a combination of both of these structures ensures that food is properly digested and the process is continuous. The villi can be further broken down into microvilli. What microvilli does is it increases the surface area of the intestinal epithelium astronomically, because of which the absorption is more prominent. The villi are supplied with capillaries, with blood capillaries. So whatever gets absorbed gets sent into the bloodstream. Yeah, so there is a network of capillaries inside the under the epithelial cells. The capillaries then are connected into the main bloodstream, so they absorb all the material and then send it into the bloodstream for distribution. How are all of these components absorbed? Most of this absorption is active in nature, so that implies there is some energy spent to absorb all of this material. There are transporters specific for each of these components. Protein gets broken down into amino acids and these amino acids get absorbed and sent to the bloodstream. Carbohydrates get broken down into monosaccharides like glucose, fructose, galactose, etc. And these are absorbed and go into the bloodstream. Fats are fats get combined with bile salts to form emulsion droplets. These emulsion droplets can then be acted upon by lipases to form free fatty acids. These free fatty acids are the ones that are taken up by the epithelial cells under active transport. The fatty acids are then are processed inside the epithelium to form chylomicrons, which then go into the bloodstream. So, as I said, there is some active, says a lot of active transport going on. The electrolytes can also be absorbed via active transport. For example, sodium ions are absorbed via active transport, whereas chloride ions are absorbed by diffusion. Water molecules can get absorbed by osmosis. So there is some passive transport going on, there is some active transport going on. Molecules like glucose can be absorbed with sodium or can get absorbed with sodium in form of co-transport. If there is problems in any of the steps, it can lead to a lot of diseases. Jaundice happens when there is excess of bile salts within the body and the bile salts are not excreted out. There's vomit, which happens if there is problem with peristalsis and the food goes upwards instead of downwards. There is diarrhea, which is uncontrolled defecation, constipation, which you can't defecate, which happens a lot if fiber consumption is not proper. There are diseases like marasmus, kwashiorkor, rickets, which are due to improper absorption or malnutrition. Osteomalacia, in which there is less calcium. So all of these diseases are due to various problems that happen within the digestive system of the body. Are there any questions till now? Okay. If there are no questions, I'll discuss a few old previous questions and then please stop me if there is any doubt anywhere. Okay. So, The first question is the organ that produces enzymes like trypsin and chymotrypsin for digestion is liver, stomach, pancreas, or small intestine. The answer is pancreas. So, pancreas produces trypsin, chymotrypsin, and carboxypeptidase. Functions The function of enzyme lactase in digestion is breaking down lactose into glucose and galactose, digesting lactose into maltose, hydrolyzing fats into glycerol, or synthesizing bile salts. The answer is breaking down lactose into glucose and galactose. The hormones that regulate digestive enzyme secretions are insulin and glucagon, gastrin and secretin, uh, adrenaline and cortisol, thyroxine and calcitonin. The answer is gastrin and secretin. Both of these are responsible for appetite control, as well as because of appetite control, when you feel hunger, they also start secreting digestive enzymes. They also start signaling for digestive enzyme secretion, so that when food finally arrives, the conditions are optimum for digestion. Insulin and glucagon are responsible for the glucose levels in the blood. Adrenaline and cortisol are responsible for flight and fight or flight response. Thyroxine and calcitonin are responsible for maintaining multiple functions. Calcitonin has major functions in calcium metabolism within the body. What prevents the stomach lining from digesting itself? Absence of digestive enzymes in stomach, presence of bile in the stomach, mucosal barrier that protects the stomach lining, or low pH of gastric juices. The answer is mucosal barrier that protects the stomach lining. Bile is never present in the stomach. Bile always comes at the junction of stomach and small intestine at the duodenum. Peristalsis in the digestive tract is initiated due to hormone signals from pancreas, bile secretions from gallbladder, enzyme release from the stomach, or rhythmic contractions of smooth muscles. The answer is rhythmic contractions from smooth muscles. Amino acids in the small intestine are absorbed through facilitated diffusion, co-transport with sodium ions, osmosis, endocytosis. The answer is co-transport with sodium ions. The enzyme that activates trypsinogen to trypsin in small intestine is enterokinase, pepsin, amylase, or lipase. So the first activation happens via enterokinase. Further activation can happen via trypsin itself. Digestive hormone that stimulates the release of bile and pancreatic enzymes is gastrin, secreting cholecystokinin, or insulin. The answer is cholecystokinin. This is one hormone which was not discussed, but it is responsible for release of bile and pancreatic enzymes when it detects food incoming. The small part of the part of small intestine that is primarily responsible for nutrient absorption is duodenum, jejunum, ileum, colon? The answer is jejunum. So digestion happens in duodenum. Jejunum and ileum are responsible for uh, nutrient absorption, but the absorption primarily happens in jejunum. The structure that prevents backflow of food from the stomach to the esophagus is pyloric sphincter, ileocecal valve, duodenal sphincter, lower esophageal sphincter. The answer is lower esophageal sphincter. The following is absorbed directly into the bloodstream from the small intestine: fat, proteins, glucose, starch. The answer is glucose. Fats need to be processed within the epithelial cells to form chylomicrons if they are to be sent into the bloodstream. Proteins and starch are very complex to be present within the small intestine. They, by that point, they would have broken down into amino acids and uh, monosaccharide molecules. To neutralize stomach acid in the small intestine, the pancreas secretes bile, sodium bicarbonate, pepsin, or lipase. The answer is sodium bicarbonate. The section of digestive enzyme, the digestive system that absorbs majority of water is stomach, pancreas, liver, or large intestine. The answer is large intestine. The ascending colon mostly has uh, a lot of absorption going on, and to some extent in the transverse colon. The descending colon usually does not have a lot of absorption going on. Micelles are fat droplets formed by bile salts, protein fragments in the stomach, bile acid molecules, or absorptive units in the small intestine. The answer is fat droplets formed by bile salts. The enzyme that is specific to DNA and RNA digestion is amylase, peptidase, nuclease, or lipase. The answer is nuclease. So there will be endo and exonucleases present which can digest it into depending on where the cutting site is. Are there any questions? Are there any questions or any doubts within, or if you want to discuss anything you can? Okay, if there are no questions, uh, thank you for listening in. I'm here for a few more minutes if there are any questions in any of the parts. If there are no more questions, then this is the end of the session. Thank you for attending. Thank you.